Welcome back to the things we know.
Today, we're going to be talking about choices and crossroads, and it all sort of trickles down from the famous Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken.
Yes. And here we are, as you know, in our mid 50s with grown kids and second careers. And it's the perfect time. Well, there's never not a perfect time for anyone at any age, but for us, it's also a perfect time to reflect on what might have been and how to find peace with where we are and be really excited about the way things turned out.
Yeah, and I think when you make peace with where you are, then if you do have some changes you want to make, it makes it a little bit easier. So we're going to talk about that. And of course, I was going to say it wouldn't be a pot if we weren't throwing some humor in, but we've had some heavy topics this
Oh, we
season.
sure
So
have.
maybe that's not true. So we are going to actively throw some humor in this time around.
Yes.
So again, this is sort of came down from the famous poem, The Road Not Taken. I don't think I ever read it in school. Obviously, I'm familiar with it. But even that, right? The meaning evolves over time. Maybe when you read it the first time around, it was as you were younger, it was like, ooh, which road, which making bold choices.
Mhm.
But now it's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And now I think in every decade it's probably going to hit differently. And in this one, I feel like it's about, especially because of the retreats we do with women, about
Yeah.
stepping into their next best chapter, about like even why we wanted to do this pod. I think it's about reflecting on the paths we've chosen, knowing we still have choices at any age, the ones we didn't take, and also like you said right before you hit record, like the ones that were made for us, like the paths that got closed off for us, like
Right.
choices. And so I think it's fascinating. It's a great time to reflect.
Yeah, and to your point, it's always a good time to reflect, but there's something about this time of year that tends to, I mean, it's literally the leaves are falling, the air is getting crisper. It's just that sense of things sort of going inward and reflecting before we burst out again in the spring with something with our next best chapter or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, we've all been down our own roads, right? You and I both have had several career changes over our lifetime. We've had kids, now they're grown, so that's a new era. There's all these little forks in the road, and maybe there's some of like, what was I thinking when I did that? But also, maybe there's a lot of like, yeah, that worked exactly the way it should. You know me, I'm not a big fan of
Yes.
woulda, coulda, shoulda. I
No,
just
I love that about
to,
you.
to what end,
Well,
So
and I think as coaches, we are well trained to help people step out of woulda, coulda, shoulda, and
yeah,
to see that like life happens for you, not to you. So
yeah.
it's not about regret as much as it is about not even. I was going to say it's more about acceptance, but it is about like, aha, this was all like unfolding the way it needed
The
to for
master
me.
plan.
Yes, yes, it's all unfolded the way it was meant to. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there's this great Forbes article that we read about making peace with the road not taken. And it talks about sort of again at how midlife we look back at the choices we made or the choices we didn't make. But again, this is about, I think there is an acceptance, right? Even if you felt or you feel some twang of regret, being able to feel that and let it pass through you so you can see the aha, this is all in the greater plan, right?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, I think you and I both know, and I think it's just who we are. There's no one on their deathbed, and there's a lot of great books about this, actually, like real accounts from hospice nurses about what people are saying on their deathbed. There's nobody on their deathbed who ever regrets like taking a wild chance. If
Mm-mm.
anything, they regret not doing those things more. No one
Yeah,
ever says, I really wish I worked longer hours. I
yeah,
really wish I had, made more safe choices. Nobody does that. So I
right.
want to say, like, yes, it like not every path. However, sometimes you have two exciting choices, and you could dwell on not taking one of those exciting choices, right? And that where's that going to get you? Because look where you ended up, right? So there was maybe an opportunity, and maybe sometimes the safe choice brought some sort of peace into your life and led to a great relationship and maybe a family that then led into different adventures. So it really is kind of a lesson in insanity to go back and try and really wish it went differently,
Yeah,
but more just like look where you ended up, and also allow that if you haven't made a lot of like unsafe, I say in quotations, like risky choices or scary choices and you wish you had, there's still time.
Absolutely. I mean,
Get those bangs. Just kidding.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah, I think again, where you're at, if you can look at where you are currently and say, this isn't bad at all. Like our kids are grown. We can edit this. Do you need to take a minute?
No, sorry about that. I was trying
No,
to
that's
turn it
okay.
off. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure everything was
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll start
Sorry
again.
about that.
No,
My
not
bad.
at all. Not at all. So again, if we could look at where we are now and accept that where we are is not a bad place at all, for you and I, right? Our kids are grown. We're on our second, third careers. I mean, we often say second, but I mean, I feel like, and you too, like this is more than our second career being coaches.
That's true.
We've had several iterations of how we walk through the world. We've learned so much. There's so much to celebrate. And so again, if you're feeling that sense of regret, that's okay. But hone in on what you do have and celebrate that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I like that it's about celebrating. And it's never too late. Who says it's too late? It's never too late. I hear women say that all the time. You hear that. We hear clients at the beginning of working with us. And sometimes when they're considering working with a coach, they're like, yeah, but it's too late. And sometimes those people don't even know to get a coach. So we don't talk to them. But if there's something you still want to do, there is always a way to figure it out. Always. I'm not saying it's exactly like, if you still want to be like 2 feet taller, we can't help you with that, but we can help you feel 2 feet taller. Yeah. But like, there may not be time to, be an astronaut, but there might be ways to like, get to the part of you that wants that and like really figure that out. And if there is a way or to get that same feeling, you'd be surprised. Like when you set your sights on what you're like, what's missing and what you're desiring, it's amazing how things start to come together to help get you there. I'm thinking of how people in their 50s and beyond start new passions, right? Like writing. I mean, my best childhood friend is just starting a master's program right now at age 55. And it's so funny because she's been sending us, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm giving off old lady vibes. I was taking notes and some 24-year-old's like, have you heard of this app? And, it's like just these... the way that her brain's feeling rusty. And I'm like, you have so much wisdom to share. You're going to be like their favorite person. Writing, traveling, something even as wild as skydiving. I've seen women who didn't start working out until their 60s and they're like stronger and have more ripped arms than anyone I know, so it really could just be anything. Learning an instrument, getting into a handstand, starting a new career, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit back in the learning something new part, I mean, it's also good to know what you don't want to do, right? Like I will never skydive. There's no way on God's green earth. I will also not play pickleball. Sorry, pickleball fans, but I am absolutely, I'm not interested in that. And I don't FOMO that, No. I mean, that's also part of no regrets. I'm not, just because somebody's doing it doesn't mean I have to do it.
Yes, because we're not saying go do something wild, period. We're saying go follow your wildest dreams. And Lisa's not dreaming about skydiving or pickleball. That is for damn sure.
Now, some people might want to make big changes, right? I mean, when we have the Best Chapter Yet retreats, that is what this is. This is about dreaming big. And oftentimes, again, this is the whole reason we started the pod. This is the reason we have the Best Chapter Yet retreats, is that we get to this stage of life and we think, well, our best days are behind us. And we know that's not true. Yes. Do we have challenges, physical, memory challenges, things like that? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean you can't still do the thing that you think is going to light you up and make you happy in this next chapter.
This is so interesting. We are having one of those moments that you and I have each had of like when we're on a topic that we think is exciting and helpful and we can relate to a little bit, where I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly me right now. Where, because I was about to say, we can get caught up in the idea that we're supposed to constantly be reinventing ourselves and doing something new. And we not that long ago recorded a learn something new thing. And I admitted to you, like, I feel like I'm not doing anything new. I'm kind of stuck and doing the same things. And you and so many people in my life were like, what? You're doing things, like they might not be things you want to do, but you're learning things and you're really, I, obviously like I'm no longer working for HCI. I have my clients, we're doing this, but I do suddenly, and my kids are getting older. I do suddenly have this feeling of what's next, but I also have shoulder surgery coming up, and I have big shifts that I want to help Griffin make so that like he's feeling like on the road to success. And would I really wish I had done something differently so that this time right now is different? Like it's a total gift that I actually have some time to, get stronger and as healthy as possible before that surgery. And that I have this time to like shift and focus on what I want to do with the pod and it's a gift. But it does sort of inspired me, that feeling of like, I should have maybe done, said yes to this too. So I have that in place, or I don't know, like I can feel the parts of me go there, but then the wiser parts of me going, nope, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. And you don't need more. You get to make peace with exactly how you set yourself up for this moment.
And I think that's it. I think it would be unusual to not be able to look back on life and go, ooh, I could have done that. Or if that had happened, you're right. At the beginning, I said, like, when I think back on my life, like the only one that ever jumps out at me is when I tried out to be a varsity cheerleader in high school. I had been a junior varsity, and I had cheered in grade school, and I didn't make it. And there's part of me, I was already moving into having different friends that were not more sports related and were more music, going down that path. So there's always been this question on my mind that I'll never have an answer to, of did I fuck up the tryouts on purpose? Because, like, what was it that made me not get chosen for varsity? But had I been chosen for varsity, my life would have looked a lot different. I wouldn't, because I wasn't a cheerleader, I had my weekends open, and I had friends that were going out to see bands, and 1 + 1 equals getting married to Darren eventually, and so,
yes. And your deep and extensive love and knowledge of music.
Right,
Like
exactly.
it creates the kids you guys have together. It's amazing. Yeah,
right.
It's so true. I love when we get to dissect it that way, because that's so interesting. And I do think what's coming through really big for me here, not just for me, but for you and for anyone listening, is, and it's a big piece of what we do in coaching and what we wanted to do with this pod, because there was like two different, there's many more groups now, but two different groups we were thinking of initially. It was the ones who were fearing like that it doesn't get any better and there was some regret, and then the ones who were like, I love this, I love the way this is turning out. And we wanted to speak to both and bring them together. So it's about knowing when to make a change and like take that risk with some full faith and enough experience behind you to say it usually works out. Or it's like knowing when to just appreciate the life that you do have and that you've built, and like start to really kind of go deep and wide and juicy with that. And when you look at it that way, there's no real wrong choice. And I could think of it, I have two people right now, one you don't know, but we were discussing this friend of mine right before, which is like always like glasses half full, and I wish I'd done things this way. And it's exhausting. It's an energy that has like continued to make things not work out very well. And then we have another friend, this isn't the opposite of that, it's just a different version of that, which is like they never really seem like they're happy with the life they have. They're constantly wishing for or feeling like or yearning for something more, something different. And it's like you and I discuss this stuff all the time, because I don't think we'd be good coaches if we didn't help people really, reframe whatever's going on for them as exactly what they need to be experiencing in that moment, even when it's hard.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, obviously, you and I and many of our listeners have gone through things. This is where, once again, it comes up with everything happens as it should. Well, but A, B, C, and D, this all sucked. And, where does that stand? And the thing is, life is not always easy. Life is hard. But again, I think, and yes, in thinking of, you have people, I have people, we have people in common. I think there's something around the energetics of, if you can, you maybe have some dissatisfaction. That's fair. I think a lot of people in midlife, I mean, it's not a midlife crisis for
Oh,
nothing, you know, and that's the
yeah.
trope, right? But we all, men and women alike, have this crossroads that we come to in midlife, that we sort of question, what's next? What did I do? How did I get here? That's fine. I think that's useful. But I think with acceptance of, okay, this is where I am now, you it opens up space and time, mind space and time, to then
Move
welcome
forward.
in more abundance, right? I just think there's a lot around when somebody is not, when there's a lot of regret, it is like a brick wall that you're hitting your head against.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not a fan of woulda, coulda, shoulda, because it's like, and you didn't. So let's acknowledge
Right.
that and move on. Because otherwise you're just boom, 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 constantly bumping up against it like a little video game person just walking into a wall constantly. It's like, how do we get around that wall or over that wall? And
Yeah.
acceptance, I think, is the first step to that aspect of it.
I mean, relationships are a great example of that. Some people who just get stuck into analyzing what went wrong
Yeah.
are like holding themselves back from being in the present and growing and moving forward and calling in what they do want.
Yeah.
And like what you just described is a lot of people's version of or definition of depression is living in the past.
Yeah.
If only, if only, if only. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm starting to think of some of the funny ones though too. Like, there's the do-overs if I could do over, right? Like, or just the funny things that happen that we look back on just naturally as we grow older, like, ooh, that haircut, or like, do I really want bangs? Or if I hadn't eaten that ceviche that gave me food poisoning, I would have been able to travel to that other place. Or people are like, wow, if we hadn't invested in that timeshare, we could have, traveled to other places.
Or if
So
I had invested
definitely,
in that Apple stock or something like
exactly,
that.
exactly. What then might have been. I think that those are real.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, nobody goes through this life making every right decision. I don't think that's a thing, It's,
Mhm.
again, it's acknowledging the decision was made, and this is how I'm moving forward from that decision, even if it was a bad decision. Should I go back to school? Should I watch Breaking Bad? Should I spend a weekend just sitting and watching Breaking Bad? I mean, there's these little micro decisions that we
Yes,
make that also need some acceptance around them, even if they were bad decisions at the time.
totally. And I don't think anyone will ever regret, spoiler alert, would ever regret binge watching Breaking Bad. In my case, it like got me some really, quality time with my boys. So
Well, I think that's the other thing too, right? Is looking at a decision in a bigger frame than just that decision. Like, because of that, yes, maybe a few boom, 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 a few things went awry, but what also went well, because you
yeah,
made that decision.
I think we've talked about these things before, but people will ask, like, what if you hadn't, said yes to move to New Orleans with Brendan and then got engaged?
Mm,
And, I wouldn't have lived in New Orleans and Nashville and wouldn't have ended up in Portland, maybe in the same way I did. Who knows? I remember what is something I was considering at the time, or even like before we left New Orleans, I was going to do a law school. And for a while, I just kept getting into law school and then not going. And when we moved to Nashville, by the way, I don't know if I ever told you that, but like I didn't like the
no.
law school there. It just did.
At
It,
Vanderbilt?
it's a great law school. No, it
Yeah.
just was more like a lot of entertainment law. And
Ah.
I had been wanting to do law MSW, like social work. So I ended
Mm-hmm.
up working for a while and then decided I wanted a master's in education. Like a lot shifted for me.
Gotcha.
But I think like if we hadn't run into each other in DC, right? If I had been like with JVC posted somewhere else when other than DC and we hadn't reconnected, I remember thinking I wanted to go back to France because I lived there my junior year. I wanted
Mm.
to get a job there. So it's like I think about those things. What if, like, what if he didn't go to Georgetown? What if he went to a different med school and we never ran into each other again? So, like you said, all these little things that had to line up make or should make, hopefully, and make it like trust that like the things fall in place. You can't like I just remember talking to my sister when our oldest got into college, and she and I were having this great conversation about like, ooh, what if you didn't choose the right place? And then we were like, no, because every choice, even when it's bad, helps you jump to the next one.
Yeah.
Then you get empowered at a really young age to advocate for yourself and figure out something new. Or maybe you don't, but your parents get to like swoop in and you get closer through the process and they help you kind of figure that out. Who knows? I mean, in his case, he probably would have advocated and figured it out, but it was the right choice. It worked out. And so even when you make a decision, go out with someone that ends up being the wrong person, you learn a ton and you grow through that. When you take that job or you don't take that trip, what else happened? So I love that. I love how this is kind of more than I realized turning out to be this sort of thing about faith.
Well, I'm going to pull a Kari now and say, you're making me think of something. Darren and I were just having this conversation this weekend around the choices we've made to move, and we were talking about, Darren has said several times to me over just in different conversations around, he's like, I think I always stay somewhere too long. And he's like, and he always starts with thinking about staying in Dayton too long. We moved to Chicago when we were 28. And I said to him, if you had decided sooner, I may not have gone. So even though I hear what you're saying, like you were done with Dayton, there was nothing there. The band he was in at the time had dissolved, and he wasn't working a job that he particularly was filling him up in any way, shape, or form. And so he had the inkling that it was time to go, but he didn't know where. He'd come out to LA on a trip with his mom, came back from LA, wasn't that interested. He was like, yeah, it was fine, but whatever. And then he got accepted to Columbia College in Chicago to get his MFA. And that's when he said, I want to move to Chicago and I want you to go with me. I went wholeheartedly. And he still says, he's like, I was surprised you said yes, because I was very close to my family at the time. Obviously, everybody was alive. And that was hard, the thought of like leaving my parents and my sister. But I was like, yeah, let's go. I love Chicago. Let's go. But I don't know, had he decided a year before. I mean, quite frankly, we were having a shit time in our relationship. So had he moved any earlier than that, I wouldn't have gone, quite frankly. And then the same is true of LA. We were trying to backtrack, like, when did he start really pushing coming out here? And we kind of narrowed it down to probably around 2015. And he was always so funny about it because it was always like pulling up in January, the weather app for LA, and be like, oh, look, it's 70 and sunny in LA as it's like snowing and cold in Chicago. But even that, like, he kind of kept, saying those things. And we came out here in 2016 and I fell in love with it. We thought we were going to move in 2020. We had this here's another part of road not taken. Our grand plan was, let's move in 2020 because Liam will have graduated high school. Charlotte will be out of grade school. So it'll be this transition regardless, right? He'll have to go to college. She'll have to go to high school. Obviously, we wouldn't have moved in 2020 because it was COVID, but it just turned out a year later, he got an opportunity out here in LA. And so we picked up and moved much in a 3 months turnaround time, like really fucking fast. So those are those things that, if you are open to possibility, the roads will appear. The roads will appear.
It's so, I love this. It's giving me chills. And it also is interesting that Darren thought he stayed places too long because you guys have lived in 3, like big cities. I mean, it's so interesting. Like we've moved a lot. Brendan and I, but then once we came to Portland, we haven't left, and we're only in our second house here. It's the first and only house we've ever owned. So when I look at like people moving around or even within town, but around, like, I'm like, wow, we really, like, maybe we're staying someplace too long. And I was actually happy that we went through like a partial remodel just so we could go through our shit. Cause
Mm-hmm.
But I think of you guys as really responsive to, like inspiration and desire and change that way. So
we are, but we're both manifestors, and I'm an emotional manifestor. He isn't, but I am. And so I can't make that kind of quick decision. I mean, had you asked me on the first day of vacation in 2016 when we were staying at the Hollywood Hotel, do you want to move here next week? I'd have been like, yes, please. Because I mean, that first vacation here was just magical. And then interestingly, the second vacation where we realized we were going to be moving wasn't as magical, but also, well, story
Yeah.
doesn't matter. But, you know, I know what he's saying, because I think he thinks that like he knows when he's kind of done, but situationally, because of a family, because of me, because of whatever, you know, responsibilities, he stays at something even when he knows he's done. I hear him, and I understand where he's coming from. I don't disagree that that's his belief and experience, but then I try to reframe it, and he can come along with me sometimes, of like, and here's what would have happened had you chose differently, you know? So
Yes. Yes.
everything fell into place when it fell into place, you know?
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. I'm thinking a lot about Brennan's brother, with all these choices over time and with kids that, were obviously affected just by the choice of which jobs he took in higher education and where
Right.
they moved. And sometimes that meant living apart for a little bit so their kids could finish all those things. That I bet you, I'm really excited after this to ask you about that. Like, how many conversations like this have you had? Well, if we had stayed there, then this might happen. And, but as a result, one thing I'm really noticing, and they continue to have that stuff roll downhill with them, but they're so tight. Like they're like,
Yeah.
Declan asked his dad to be his best man at his wedding. And, like they're so tight and insular as a result of all this movement together over
Yeah.
time during developmental years. And they're not at all mad about it. They are so like loving and clear and supportive of each other. It's pretty neat.
Okay, but so then to that point, like I think about Charlotte right now, you know, again, we're recording this much earlier than it's being dropped, but you know, she is just now, and I shouldn't even say just now, it's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago today we moved her in. But she like we feel it. Things are settling, you know, and she made a conscious decision to be like, I'm going to change my mindset about this, because I could be like, oh, I want to be at home. Oh, I wish I was doing this. Oh, la, 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 but I'm not. So I need to make the best of this, and pay attention to the things that are good about college. You know, if I keep paying attention to the things I don't like, that's all I'm going to pay attention to. You know, and granted, she's grown up with a coach for a mom, and so I'm so very grateful for that. But like, it's pretty. I'm watching it happen real time. This like, well, I should have, maybe if I had done this, I could have stayed at home or done that, or maybe I should have done what Liam did. And I'm like, but you didn't. And so here we
And
are.
here we are.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
here we are. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's a great example too. Yeah, I think about all those what ifs, and Miles still has a bunch ahead of him too.
yeah.
And honestly, in a much more like um somber way, I can't do that at all with the choices and the decisions we made along the way with Griffin. Like we've always done the best we can.
Yep.
But I wouldn't be human if I didn't tell you, and you know this already, but if I didn't say this, like how many times I've been like, God, if we had just pursued this maybe, or if we had just looked at this sooner, or if we had gotten in front of him before he fell, like those things
Yeah.
like that. Like if I decided to wear different shoes, or and seriously, like I could have run faster on that instead of, those kind of things. Those are great examples of why that never helps.
Yeah.
Never helps.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything, and it doesn't help anybody, least of all you. So yeah, we should call this one Instead of the Road Not Taken. No regrets. It's all happening for you.
In some way, shape, or form. And you do not have to know in the depths of something going wrong how this is working out for you. Quite frankly, in the depths of something going wrong, or even in the aftermath, you may never figure out why it worked for you, why it happened, quote unquote, for you. That is okay. We are never trying to push that belief system on you per se. I just know that for me, it works if I can figure out how it worked out for me versus sitting in the muck. I mean, I don't sit there sometimes, but that's just what has worked for me. And I know it's worked for you as well.
Yes. And that is not to say that growing up the way we did with the sitcoms we had that I didn't always enjoy, those versions of like, what if?
Yeah.
And
Choose your own adventure.
they would act out a whole thing where like the Studley guy was nerdy, or the, like the shy
Yeah.
girl was like the queen, or the like boss bitch or something. Like it's just so funny. Like I've always loved like alternate realities and
Oh yeah.
things like that. Those are super fun. And my kids are really into those multiverse
Oh yeah.
things. And so that, I don't know why that just came up for me, but like, what if I could have this life, but there was a version of me living that life? What would that look like? Those are kind of fun fantasies.
Of course. Absolutely. All right. So the song we picked this time, oh, I just love this song. I did not actually know this from Fleetwood Mac. I learned it when the Chicks did it the first time, but
Oh,
Landslide, yeah. I since obviously immediately went back and listened to Stevie's version, but Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, such a good song.
oh, she just nails it. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, so do the Chicks in a different way, but yeah.
sure.
Yeah, the lyrics, like, well, I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you. I think that is why it came to mind for me. There's a lot of great songs that we could maybe even be better fit, but I like it because it's definitely a reflection right there
Yeah.
of like, oh, my life went this way,
Hmm.
and how might it be different, and like, and we imprinted on each other, so it's like forever changed, right? Like because we made that choice. So I don't know, I just, it's like those moments where we realize our life was built around certain choices, and now we're standing at another crossroads.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of both wistful and hopeful, that song. It's so good. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's being able to reflect on your past while also seeing the path or paths that lay out in front of you.
Yeah, and I'm like thinking about the amount of people you and I have worked with and love and continue to work with who have gone through divorce, and not all of them, but some of them are like, oh, if I had never married, and I'd be like, well, I mean, you did.
Yeah.
And that's why I've, very strongly many times said, I don't know that it was a failure. I think it just is over. And what did it teach you? And what do you want more now? Like, so again, that's maybe a choice that was made for you in some cases, or a choice that you had to make um, for whatever reason. But it is like that. It's the moment of thinking about whatever you didn't do that is an opportunity to go, what next? What now? What do I want?
Mm, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the takeaway is sort of like, okay, yeah, you can think about what if, and like you said, it's sort of fun to fantasize about how a life could look different. But it's also just as important to appreciate the road you're on and see what opens up from there.
And if we do decide to take a new path, so important to remember, we're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. You're starting from knowledge. You're starting from wisdom.
Yes, we're never starting over. That's like
Mm.
literally impossible. It's just taking where you're at and expanding from there. So embrace the journey, laugh at the small stuff. If you got bangs and you don't like them, they'll grow. It's fine. They'll grow. But again, every road, every path, every micro decision, every big decision we've made has led you to exactly where you are, dare I say, exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yes. Well, I mean, you said it best. So I would just want to say, keep walking your path, whichever one you're on. And thanks for listening. I love this conversation. I think we'll probably revisit this in multiple ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've ever wondered about that road not taken, clearly don't worry about it. We all have. So that's awesome.
Stop at a pub on that road and you'll find people
Yeah,
at that
have a
pub feeling
beer.
the same way.
Yep. Amen. I'll meet you at that pub.
As always, thank you for listening. And if you don't already subscribe to our newsletter, you can do that by, is it by emailing us? What's the best way to do it? Go to our website,
Yeah,
actually.
go to the things we know podcast.com and you can sign up on a link there. And then, yes, Kari sends out really great follow ups to each pod. Sometimes they get out every week, sometimes MailChimp's a jerk and it comes out every couple weeks. But she always writes a gorgeous email, and there's the links and all the stuff that's also in the show notes, but sometimes it's just easier to click on there from the newsletter. Plus, this retreat our October retreat is over, but the next one will be coming. So stay tuned. That's where you would find out about it first.
Hey,
Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Bye.